Password.
Zapper.
Welcome, gentlemen. Before you are some of the finest tools for first-person shooters.
What the hell is this? We'll take it.
Those who were gaming during the mid to late 2000s may remember the rise of military FPS games that dominated the console market. The rivalry between the PS3 and the Xbox 360 was at its peak, and both consoles had a strong library of first-person shooters. At the same time, many viewed the Nintendo Wii as the console for children, families, or their Wii bowling-playing grandmas. With the goal to create an FPS experience that catered towards the hardcore gamer, a studio by the name of High Voltage Software, who we have referenced before, decided to change the perception of the Wii. Released in the summer of 2009, the Conduit aimed to provide a similar FPS experience, only this time with motion controls. At a quick glance, the Conduit seems like your basic FPS game. It has a gritty, military-focused campaign with dark graphics, shooting action, and of course, multiplayer modes you can play online. What really makes the game stand out is the controls. Being on the Wii, of course this game would utilize motion controls, and nothing else. To be fair, the game is actually a standout case in game controls. The setting menu lets you adjust the motion sensitivity in real time, and even allows you to completely remap controls as well. You can even rearrange the HUD if you want to, it's pretty wild. Despite this, controlling in the Conduit is the game's worst aspect. I had to turn the sensitivity down quite a bit, and I still had issues just aiming and moving around. Since the game can only be played with a Wiimote and nunchuck, you only have access to one stick, which is used for movement. Using motion to control the camera and your direction is awful. Either you'll be bumping against walls, or just desperately pointing off screen to have your character slowly rotate, like an old school Resident Evil character. Aiming is a challenge, but honestly, it is pretty responsive with the Wii Motion. It's just that you have to use Wii Motion to aim that's the problem. It has not aged well at all, and I usually wouldn't mind as much, but what bothers me is the lock-on feature. You can use Z to lock onto an enemy, but this does not snap your cursor to the enemy. It just adds a box around the enemy to see its health. It may be too easy if the game helped you that much, but it seemed like a pointless feature to me. I'm not going to talk much about the game's story as it's pretty mediocre, but for its time it did provide a more mature story for the Wii. The game also had various multiplayer modes that could support up to 12 players, and with in-game voice chat through the Wii Speak add-on. Graphically, it's pretty nice to look at. It was praised at the time for its visuals, especially for the Wii. High Voltage specifically designed a graphics engine called Quantum 3, which aimed to really show off that the Wii could compete with the other consoles. And I feel like that this really hits the theme with the game today. At its time, it was an important statement that helped show what the Wii could do. It challenged the idea that the Wii is only for kids, and delivered a decent FPS experience before more of the well-known FPS games were released on the system. The game today feels limited in its forced motion control scheme and awkward movement, but it isn't terrible by any means. The Conduit would end up getting a sequel in 2010, which thankfully supported the classic controller. Also, I do not recommend playing this with the Wii Zapper because you will get hand cramps.
There's not a single person on this earth who has not heard of Call of Duty. The annual first-person shooter franchise has become the basis for most shooters nowadays. Now, while you might be rolling your eyes at me for bringing up Call of Duty because of how prolific it is today, and how tired most of us are of the series, when the Wii was around, it wasn't. One of the best games in the series was Modern Warfare, and the Wii got a port of it called Modern Warfare Reflex Edition, 2 years after the initial release due to the incredible success of the original. A similar treatment was given to Modern Warfare 3, but sadly, Modern Warfare 2 was never ported to the Wii. The game controls like every other game we're talking about. You have swaggle controls to point at the screen and shoot enemies. This game was advertised to be used with the Wii Zapper, which I kinda disagree with going back to it now. The game requires you to use a lot of buttons on the face of the Wiimote, and if you're using the Zapper, it forces you to crab claw the controller, which is really uncomfortable, and you're better off having them separate. Reloading also requires you to shake the nunchuck, and if you try to do it when strapped together, it's awkward and it won't work half the time. Now, I did play with the Zapper back when I was younger, but I did a lot of stupid things back then and didn't really know better, and I'm not really the best example in general, so don't follow my lead. So this game follows the same story as the original release with no changes. Graphically, it is significantly weaker than its original release on any platform, but if you're playing on a Wii, that kinda comes with the territory. It is still a solid way to play the game though, with all the iconic missions from the game, from the infamous nuke scene to the amazing Chernobyl mission. I also have fond memories of sinking hours into the multiplayer on this. Yes, even on the Wii, the multiplayer for this was huge. Unfortunately, like every other game now, the multiplayer servers are long since dead. This game holds up though as one of the most timeless Call of Duty games today. It is still a very solid game with a ton of memorable missions, and if you play it on PC, it still has a very active multiplayer scene. I wouldn't really recommend playing this on the Wii if you have access to other systems, as it is easily the weakest option, but it still holds a special place for me, as the Wii was all I had growing up. Because my laptop was a potato, and I had signed my soul to Nintendo when I was 6, and my contract wasn't quite up yet.
Go, go, go! Moving in.
When you think of classic FPS games, the first two that usually come to mind are Doom and Goldeneye. So at E3 2010, everyone lost their minds that Nintendo was bringing back one of the iconic series over to the Wii. How could they introduce the game to a new generation of gamers? Well, it seemed to be a mixed bag. Goldeneye was the shooter everyone played on the N64, myself included. Ever since the release of this game, EA obtained the rights to the James Bond movies and released several shooters in an attempt to recreate the same level of success to no avail. Activision was the next company to get a hold of the license, and with the help of Eurocom, they sought out to release the most popular GoldenEye game since the N64 title. As you boot the game, you play through the iconic dam level at the beginning of the game. It is immediately evident that they are trying to appeal to the old school fans by remaking some of the levels, while attempting to bring in new fans by making a modern control scheme that's similar to the Call of Duty games. So I am a GoldenEye and a perfect Dark fan, so I knew I had to have this game for my collection. I ended up buying the bundle with the Classic Controller Pro so I could have the best experience. I recall beating the game within the week and decided to dive into the multiplayer. The next step was to find someone to play with, so I ended up finding a couple of other guys from a retro gaming forum I used to visit. We ended up playing hundreds of hours online and was the first time I frequently played with people I didn't know in real life. Before I transferred all my saves and games to my Wii U from my Wii, I decided to see what was the most played game on the console, and of course, it had to be GoldenEye with over 300 hours. Those days are in the past, and I eventually got a PS3 and a 360 as my main consoles for online gaming, but I'll never forget all the time I put in GoldenEye for the Wii. Enough of reminiscing, back to the gameplay. The game is scripted scenes alongside some firefights against waves of enemies. It isn't anything extraordinary, but I think it does the job. It is very similar to how modern shooters are laid out and uses the Bond license as a new coat of paint. Guns feel good, but they're ultimately unmemorable. I feel the same way with the graphics. They look good for the Wii, but it isn't anything I'm amazed when I'm looking at them. The music, on the other hand, it is quite catchy and something I listen to outside the game. Of course it had to be good. the title song was done by David Arnold, who actually writes music for several Bond films, and the rest of the music was done by Kevin Kenner, who did the music for Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. Ultimately, Goldeneye on Wii is a good game on the Wii, but as a matter of fact, it is one of the best FPS games on the Wii, but it's not like there's much competition to start off with. I enjoyed it a lot, but the Wii strong suit are light gun games, not first-person shooters. There's a reason no one talks about the PS3 and 360 port, because it's another unmemorable shooter on those consoles. I'd check it out if you're craving FPS on the Wii, but remember, why play GoldenEye when you could be playing Plock on Super Nintendo?
Man, I know motion controls didn't hold up as well as we hoped they would, but you know what does hold up? GoldenEye.
Ryan, for the love of God, take off those nostalgia goggles.